Next item is to discuss the budget amendment for the cemetery department for Mowers. Mayor.
Yeah, every 2 or 3 years, Pete Bell, the superintendent of the cemetery department, trades his mowers in, and you have in your packet there a list of 3 mowers that he wants to purchase, and with the trade-in value. And if you'll allow him to do that, we need a budget amendment of $10,350 for the cemetery department for 3 mowers. He usually does this every 2 years, I think, or 2 to 3 years anyway. So it's time for it to happen.
Any questions? No, we'll move to tonight's agenda as well.
I have just one question on that. Mr. Mayor, you show the trade-in value. Are they trading those into the dealership, or are we going to?
Yes, to the dealership. Yeah, it's part of the deal. Yeah.
Is that a better method than using the gov bids?
I think so. Mr. Wheeler shaking his head yes, and I think that was being his recommendation, and I think he looked at it both ways.
Any other questions? I will go to number 5. Discuss the RDS ALATAX contract. Rick?
You have in your packet there for over the past 20 years plus, we've used an outside collection agency to collect the sales, use, and lodging tax and do audits instead of using the state of Alabama Department of Revenue to collect and audit. One of the major reasons that we do this is we receive our money the next day versus 30 to 60 days when collected by the state of Alabama and the Alabama Department of Revenue. I would recommend that you authorize the mayor and the clerk to renew the contract with RDS and ALATAX for our sales tax collections.
Any questions for Mr. Wheeler? No, we'll move it to tonight's.
Mr. Kimmer has reviewed this and I recommend the contract.
Yes, I have reviewed the document. We have worked with this group for a number of years. They've been very good to work with, very straightforward. I would join Mr. Wheeler's recommendation.
Stay up there, Rick. We'll go to number 6, discuss financing and information on capital projects.
You also have in your packet bids from 3 banks and Raymond James Financial on the $3 million worth of capital projects. The rates that I have arrows pointing to on your sheets there are inclusive of all fees. I would recommend going with the lowest rate, and also would recommend going with a 20-year time frame. And I recommend this due to the fact that probably about 5 to 6 years we'll be looking at a landfill expansion, and we'll be needing to borrow some more money up there. So I looked at the 10-year, and the 10-year rate it's a good rate, but if we strap ourselves financially, then we won't be able to do the landfill expansion that will have to happen. So I believe if you look at the rates, the lowest rate was given to us by Raymond James. And if you have any questions.
I've got one question. You said 3 million. How do we know 3 million? I mean, there's nothing anywhere except an old thing at the Heritage Center. Other than that, we're just looking at a problem and say, oh, that's $1 million, oh, that's $1 million, oh, that's $500,000. How do we go about taking the 3 million and going ahead and figuring out how to borrow money when we don't even know how much money we need?
The $3 million is just the number that I've been hearing tossed around, so that's the one that I used.
It's the number that we got from the architectural firms, or firm to, on the estimates, and my answer to that is, 3 million is all there is, we're gonna have to live within it. That's just my answer.
Technically, there ain't 3 million, not yet, but,
No, that's right, but, you know, whatever you approve to borrow, and it is what it is, and Heritage Center, they realize it's $500,000, and anything over they gotta cover, I think it's how you recognize that fact, so.
what I would like to see, and is someone look at each project and come before this council and tell us how much money it's gonna take to do this.
I think we'll do that on the next agenda item, I think. Let's start it.
Then let's go to it first and then come back. We're not voting anyway, so proceed on, I'm sorry.
Mr. Wheeler, you said that these figures include all fees, is that true?
Yes.
So that is council fees, any fees associated with the transaction?
If it's a bond issue, any fees associated with it. The rate from the banks, from what I understand from them, there is no fees.
And that doesn't include interest, correct?
No. Well, that is the interest rate.
Interest, amount of money for interest, that's what.
Right.
Go ahead.
Mr. Winter, I was curious, the 5% for a local vendor, does that apply in this situation? To a local business?
Henry shaking his head now.
No, sir. And every one of these entities would be local business.
All of them?
Yes. But it does not apply to financial transactions.
And I may be wrong on this, but for my own satisfaction. My understanding is if we use a bond, there is an issuance event, correct? You have a bond issue,
Yes.
and you start paying interest on that bond at that issuance. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So, I guess one of our questions, or my questions would be what the timeline on certain projects are gonna be. How long are we gonna be paying interest on those projects prior to there being distribution of funds? And I know that's probably premature at this point, but, if you look at bond issuance versus traditional financing, do you start paying interest on a traditional finance prior to issuance of funds, distribution of funds?
You're gonna do the same either way if you go to the bank and borrow the money or if you issue the bonds. It's gonna take probably 4 to 6 weeks for any kind of bond issue to occur anyway. From just conversation that we've had, there's the ball fields, the renovation of the ball fields. I don't think you could be able to start any renovation of the ball fields until sometime July or August because of the games that are going on down there now. So some of the other items that are on the list, you probably gonna have to have an architect to go in and make renderings and drawings and all that to give you the information to even bid that off. So with any of it, you're gonna have that money that's gonna be sitting there. And the other part of it is, if you don't act on it, you may get a higher interest rate because of the change in the market from the interest rate or the Fed raising the rates for interest too. I'm not sure that we're gonna see any lower interest rate.
I've been hearing higher interest rates for 5 years.
I have.
Any other questions for Rick?
My concern is that, and I probably already ended where I'm at, but we've got the mayor who states he's probably not gonna run. We've got another councilman who says he is gonna run for mayor. We perhaps have others on the council who might run. And technically, not one of them may be here when it's over. So, would it not be prudent on our part to at least get all this settled before we go into this much debt at this time? That's just my thought. I'm gonna leave it.
We'll put you over the project, see, how's that?
You did that once already. Already out of control.
That's funny. Any other questions?
Mr. Twitter, I think it might behoove the general public to hear the bids.
Okay. From People's Independent Bank, the 20-year bid was 4.05%. From Raymond James, the percent was 3.23. From First National Bank, the rate was 3.75. And from this is First Southern State Bank, the rate was 3.35.
And your recommendation was Raymond James at 3.33 or 3.23?
What's the last one?
3.35.
First Southern State Bank.
First Southern State
3.35.
Bank.
First up? So if you took, if you borrowed money from First Southern, without all the fees and all the other stuff, it'd probably be cheaper than Raymond James, wouldn't it?
No, sir, that 3.23 is including all the fees. Sir? Yes, yes.
Yeah, it has all inclusive costs. What's the earliest you could start paying toward principal with the bond? Or could you? Would that be written into the agreement?
I believe if you look at the Raymond James sheet there, they have given you that the 3 million wrap around 20 year is the first column there. So the first year of that is 2023 that would allow you to start making principal payments. And this is due to some of the current debt being paid off. I believe the Fire Station 1, City Hall, and Fire Station 2 is the part that will be dropping off in 2022.
Any other questions? Comments?
Do we have a timeline, Rick, Mr. Mayor, on these projects?
Yeah, I was gonna talk about that, but, to me, the priority is those baseball fields, the veterans fields, because you're looking at a time frame that we wanna try to get this accomplished. Christine is here with the architect that we're gonna talk about, here in just a minute, but, she can give you the guidelines about how long it takes to draw up the plans for each one. To me, that's the number one priority, because I think Yvonne told me June is when the season ends. And so we'll have from June until March to get that completed. And I think that is doable. If not, Yvonne has a contingency plan in place if they have to do something temporarily at the beginning of next year. Of course, then the swimming pool area, the indoor pool, that's probably the second priority, in that there is a little bit of a scheduling conflict at a certain time of year for the swim teams, best I remember. And I don't know those dates right off the top of my head, but we're working around a little bit of a schedule there. And then, of course, the fire station and the Heritage Center, that really could happen anytime. I think there might have been some concern about scheduling. Well, there's probably going to be different contractors on every one of these. So you know, it's being run by a different contractor, or presumably could be. The architect is there to look out for us, for our benefit, to make sure we're getting what we built. I have always had a policy, whenever we bid a project, a huge project such as a soccer field or any roads, that we have a pre-construction meeting in this room, and they're told right off the bat, we pay the architect to design whatever the project is, and we pay in the contractor to build it. So anything that goes wrong is not our fault. We're not into change orders, and we've been very successful in that. So it's probably a long answer, and if it's okay, Patrick, I'll just go into this next part. You have in your packets 4 contracts for each one of these projects for KPS architectural firms. KPS, Christine Harding, she lives here in town. She's done work for us in the past. She's the one who gave us the estimates. For us to get anything more detailed, we're going to have to pay for it. We haven't paid anything to this point. Her fees, she can talk about this, or if you have any questions for her, are based on a state sliding scale, so it's not like you can shop it around. It's pretty much, it is what it is. She was also, was KPS, I know you were involved in the city hall, the old city hall. Was that KPS, or was that a different?
They bought.
Okay, so she worked for the firm, and she did the design on the police department down there, which was an award winner, for some kind of award with the state or national. But anyway, they've done a lot of great work for us, and they do a good job. Mr. Kimmer, you all should have had these contracts for the last week and a half, I think, and Mr. Kimmer's looked at them, and I'll let him speak to them, but they are for basically individual contracts for each project. And Christine, you may, if they have any questions, and you'll certainly ask her any questions. The sooner, this would really be the first step to get these projects going, so she can start the design work based on the meetings that we had through our committees. With that, I'll ask if there's any questions.
Christine, you want to come? Were you involved in the city hall?
Yes.
Okay. How did that come under budget? Or
I believe it did.
I believe it did, and the police department as well.
Well, I think that's what you're talking about.
Police department.
Okay, but
That's what.
the old city hall building.
Right. Sorry.
But we also did this building too.
You finished it up. You didn't
Yeah,
start it.
finished it. That's right.
That's very
Let's be
important.
clear.
Very important.
We saved it.
Yes.
The point was that it did come under budget. I think I was here that night that y'all actually discussed it and praised y'all for doing that. So we're hoping that you do the same thing with these.
Absolutely.
But
Could you talk just about the timeline? I mean, is it, what I said, is that right, or is it close to?
It is. We certainly have the capacity to do all 4 projects at the same time, but knowing that June is when the season ends, and what the mayor and I have talked about is that would be the best time to start doing the demolition, which I understand you're going to do yourselves. That at least gives us a chance to get all the structures down and hold a pre-construction meeting where the contractors or the bidders can come and look at the site and see what the conditions are that they'll be working with. And then I believe that at that point we can get that construction going at a time of the year when dirt work really needs to be during a dry season, and get that started and hopefully completed by when the season starts again in March. And then of course the pool and the work with the RecCom, I understand, is the second priority. That's going to be mostly indoor work, so even if we were to find ourselves pushing that off more towards the fall when the contractors like to have indoor work as opposed to outdoor work, if that works with the schedule. But for any of the projects, we're going to need anywhere from 90 to 120 days to put together the contract documents in order to do that. The ball fields can accelerate slightly ahead of that. And then it's my understanding, I think there's still some discussion about the fire station. There may be some options that we might push that off towards the end of the year. And of course, the Heritage Center, we've already done some preliminary work on it for the concept and the addition that they've got some renderings on. So we were involved in that early on a couple of years ago. So I think that it's always best to look at, first of all, when seems to be a very competitive time of the year for the contractors to bid and want to do the work, especially if it's indoor work versus outdoor work. And also in terms of, I built into the numbers contingency, and the contingency is usually for things like in the rec column, you start uncovering unforeseen conditions and what you could find in that. That's probably the most vulnerable project in terms of just contingency. The ball fields, I think that we can do enough geotech or subsurface exploration in those outfields to understand what kind of fill we might be able to bring, we might have to bring in. It looks to me like the infields had some structured fill and the outfields seem to be sinking towards that ditch in the back. So I think there's some soils issues back there.
Did I notice, Ms. Hardy, that the contract did not include civil?
It doesn't on that. Typically, the way the state of Alabama sliding fee schedule goes is it covers all of your standard engineering, which is architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and structural. And civil is usually just, you never know what the site conditions are, you never know the extent or the scope of the site. So what I would be doing is I would be going out and getting proposals from civil engineers for that.
And I noticed that the Heritage Center addition, I think the primary purpose was going to be for meetings. Is that my understanding?
That was my understanding. Some different types of events. Of course, a kitchen was part of that, the best I remember, and it was about 3,000 square feet.
I guess one of my questions is, it's designated as museum space, which is a higher percentage rating. I'm wondering why that's not designated as convention or meeting space.
Well, mainly because there's also historic preservation involved with it, because it is a historic structure that's also found underneath that, as well as museum, and there will be some work done to the space itself. And once we get into the project and understand the scope of what we have to do on the inside versus also how much we have to do for the historic preservation, we can also divide it up where we actually designate the area to a category 3 versus a category 5. So we're happy to do that.
That was my question, because it's a much more competitive rate if
Yes.
it's meeting space. As I look at contingencies there, I noticed that when I looked at the preliminary figures on the pool project, for instance, there was, in my opinion, a very liberal contingency figure attached to that, the 20% contingency. Is there a reason that there's such a large contingency for that project?
Typically, we recommend to you that you carry a 20% contingency at the beginning of the project, and as we get more and more information on the project itself, we can make recommendations for you to lower that. That's your money. We don't put that in the contract for the contractor. That's what you keep on your side. And what the mayor and I also talked about is because that project has a lot of unforeseen conditions as it relates to the dressing room area, the mechanical system in the pool, and also just the condition of the pool, that it may be possible that some of the other projects won't have to use as much of the contingency, and we may need to even use more contingency for that. Just to cover those things, that once we get into demolition of things, that we'll begin to find some surprises with that. Unless we have the ability to go in and do some destructive testing on the front end, but I believe you want to minimize how much time you have to shut the building down for use by the public.
And you or the mayor want to make the statement that theoretically all these projects could happen at the same time. That, to me, that's a concern, because quite frankly, with some projects that we have done in the past and are happening now, project management has not been what we would like for it to have been. So if all of those projects were going on at the same time, and then you've got Porter Road being completed, and you've got Clemens Road hopefully coming behind that, and the square happening, that's 7 fairly major projects all going on at the same time. So I think that's just something we need to be aware of also.
I do like to spend my whole day in Scottsboro though, that way then I don't have to leave home. But I don't think, I really made that statement simply so that you knew that we had the capacity and staff to do the project for the construction documents, and not necessarily that that's the way that would time.
And, you know, that's what we pay them for, is to look after these projects. I don't oversee any of these projects. You know, I get the complaints and try to address them, but that's what we pay the construction people, the engineering people, those who oversee the road, the construction, the engineering, and inspection. That's what they're paid for. You know, no, it doesn't always go like we want or we plan, but I don't control the weather either. So I don't think it's a problem just because we got 7 projects going on. I don't think that's a problem from our standpoint. That's what we're paying these folks for.
And I assume that we hit certain benchmarks throughout these projects where funds are released to contractors and things of that nature.
Well, the first thing we do is, in observing the project, when they submit a pay application, I verify, first of all, whether they've completed the work that they're asking to be paid for, but if also they're asking for money for stored materials, that they verify that they've purchased those stored materials. And also with tax exempt, there's a lot of paperwork that goes along with verifying that as well. But then I go in and I look at their schedule of values. We require them to do a very detailed schedule of values so that we know exactly what they're asking to be paid for. And then on behalf of you, then I make a recommendation back to you all as to what I feel is fair. We also recommend that you hold retainage so that you don't get to the end of the project, and that especially at the end of the project, if there's some deficient work that we don't feel that they have completed, that you don't have jumped out there and paid them more than what they've actually completed or what could actually be completed at that point.
Mr. Weaver, when Ms. Harrigan and her firm makes that certification, who then is responsible for approving release of funds?
They would submit a requisition to us, and then if everything looks okay, in the past, I've been looking at them as released the funds.
It's really a set of checks and balances, really. Yes, and if the contractor's asking you, you're verifying it. Once you verify it, it's sent to Rick, and then he makes a request from the bonding company or whoever to pay you. So
That's right, and our engineers are also looking at that, so I'm not making a determination about what might be completed electrically from a professional standpoint. That engineer needs to do that as well.
Ms. Hardy, under the standard contract that you have given on each of these, there's a provision about change orders. And change orders are generally a part of most of the project, but it's something that the city doesn't like.
Right.
This authorizes you to authorize minor changes in work that are consistent with the intent of the contract documents and do not involve an adjustment in the contract sum or an extension of the contract time. If there were any change orders, would you anticipate bringing those to the council?
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
There's a nice agenda as well to, for the contract, KPS architects, for the mayor and clerk to sign off on.
Is that the part that you're doing, what's this contract? They're gonna, the mayor said that we had to pay to get an exact price on all the projects. Is that the first thing we're talking about?
An estimate, Christine, a bid. Is that what you're asking, Keith?
I'm asking that, we're not starting the project, we're
No.
just getting a price for the project at this point, is that correct?
We're contracting with them to do the design work, yes, and then put it out for bid. Is that correct?
Then we're fixing to do it then, on what we voted on tonight, that's right? Are we just getting the price? We don't even know how much it's gonna cost. And you just said we're not gonna know until we pay. And I'm asking, are we fixing to pay to get a price for each one of these projects? But I understand you say we're gonna get a price for each one of these projects, then you're gonna let the bids start the project.
We're gonna update the budget right now, based on the numbers that we've put to the scope that we understand each of the four projects. We've put budget numbers with contingency and also with all the professional fees, and that's what the mayor's been working with. And then, as we develop the project, first of all, we need to understand if there's been any scope change, because I know each of you have been over some of the projects, and I understand that there's some input that we want to have on that. But there's 3 different stages during the project that will update those budgets. It's at schematic design, at design development, and then at construction documents. And at those stages, we can adjust the project to meet the budget if something has changed, if we've added scope that we need to take back out or just, prioritize. And then we'll issue for bids. And at that point, when the bids are received, you won't be paying for anything on that project unless you accept the bids. Whether they're the low bidder that meets your budget, or whether you throw them out and decide to either rebid it or. But at this point, what I need to do is I need to get to work just to find out exactly how that scope meets the budget, and do that 3 different times during the process.
That's the end of the work session. Give me 3 minutes to get everything moved over to the council meeting.